Okay. Welcome everyone to this episode of SolidWorks Live Design. So here at Live Design, we have to learn from each other. We like to have some live demos and some tips and tricks and that sort of thing. And so we're going to be doing that today. My name is Mark Peterson, and today we're going to be joined by Steve Fick. Steve manages our technical marketing team here at SolidWorks, and he's been using SolidWorks for a very long time. Steve has probably just about every SolidWorks certification known to man. So he definitely has racked up a lot of tips and tricks over the years, and I think he's going to share some of those with us. So, welcome, Steve. How's it going?
It's good. I feel old on that introduction, but yeah, I'm good.
You're experienced, and that's really what
Better way to put
that's
it.
what we're going to leverage today is your massive amount of experience. So yeah, let's get right into it. So I guess first, Steve, what are we going to see today?
Yeah, so we're going to see kind of three areas of SolidWorks. We're going to look at how a couple of features and functions to boost productivity. We'll look at some that are going to allow you to do some analysis of your designs, and then some features in drawings. And these are all going to be lesser known features that I hope, if you're a longtime SolidWorks user, you may get a kick out of, you may have forgotten about, but it might be fun to just kind of jog your memory on them. And if you're a newer SolidWorks user, we'll introduce you to some of these features and capabilities.
Awesome. So a little bit for everyone, really. Anyone that's used SolidWorks in the past or is new to SolidWorks, sounds great. Okay, well, we'll get right into it. But first, I just do a quick reminder. If in the chat, guys, let us know what you think about some of the things that Steve is showing us throughout the chat. Also, definitely hit subscribe for us. That's going to really help out our channel here and make sure that we can continue to bring you cool episodes like this and neat tips and tricks and that sort of thing. And if there's anything that you learned here today on the stream, definitely hit the like button as well, just to show your appreciation for Steve and all the experience that he's going to lay on us today. So, all right, cool. Yeah, let's go for it, Steve.
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll get into it. We're going to start by looking at ways to boost your productivity, some of these features. And like I mentioned before, Mark, it's going to be a little bit of a features, tips, tricks, a combination of a little bit of everything. So we'll start right into this model that I've got on the screen. And one of the first things I'll point out is the feature manager actually contains this little area over here that a lot of people, I don't know that they realize you can actually filter the feature tree just by typing the name of a feature. And part of the reason I like pointing this out is because, this part's got a lot of features. There's a lot going on there. And so being able to quickly get to, something that you're looking for, typing is, just typing the name of the feature is super, super handy. But I want to pair this with another feature that I don't know that people also use a lot. And that is tagging. And so what tagging allows me to do is allows me to select a feature, and then down here in the right-hand corner, I can hit this little tag button and I can give it a tag. And any tags that I've used show up there. So in this case, this is a cosmetic fillet. So I'm just going to select that as the tag. And once I do that, that then also is searchable. So if I type in cosmetic, immediately the three fillets that I've tagged with that now show up. And the other use case for this that's handy is, we talked about, the size of this feature tree. A lot of times you might want to, you've got an element of your design. Like for instance, this is the wing on this part, and it's made up of a boss extrude. It's made up of a fillet. There's actually a surface cut in here. And then there's a cosmetic fillet over here. Getting those all into, like, if you were to take the approach of using a folder, getting those all into a folder could be a little tricky, just because you do still have to adhere to the way that the feature tree solves. But with tags, you can tag all those things like with the tag wing, and it doesn't matter where they are in the feature tree. And now you basically can group them together based on the design feature on the part, as opposed to using folders or things like that. So this is a super cool way of kind of getting to just what it is you're looking for and organizing your features.
I never knew that existed. And man, Sean O'Neill in the chat is saying also, wow, I did not realize that. So I didn't realize that either. I'd always just renamed my features to support this. But sometimes those names can get really long, if you're trying to describe something. So these tags are pretty incredible. I had no idea. That's great. Nice tip to start us off. Thanks, Steve.
So yeah, cool feature there. So another thing that comes into play is like, okay, so I've got this feature that is, this fillet that's in red. I've made the change, but now I want to apply that change to a bunch of other fillets. And what I could do is, the list isn't super long here, but right, I'd have to go into every one of these and go, okay, edit feature, change the value, edit feature, change the value. So another feature that I don't know, again, maybe a lot of people may have forgotten about, is what's called Feature Painter. And by default, this actually, you have to come in and go to your customize menu and turn this on. And Feature Paint works a lot like if you've used it in Microsoft tools or other tools. When you select this, you can paint the properties of a feature onto others. So like, for instance, the feature that we want to use to copy from is that fillet 29, that one right there. And the fillets that we want to apply it to are two other cosmetic fillets that we've got. So you add these in. I'm going to uncheck paste appearance properties for a minute, and you can see that it will apply those properties, like the size. You can see what it's going to copy from to what it's going to paste to, and any other feature properties that are in there. But then you can also have it apply the appearance properties as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply this, and it'll go off, and anything you've loaded into the paste properties dialog, it will go through and apply that to those features as well. And the nice thing about this is, like I said, it's just a matter of like, I don't have to go into every feature and choose edit feature. Once I load them up, it just takes care of adding that. I will say this, you need to do like features. So like, for instance, I can't take an extruded cut and copy a whole wizard hole to it. Right. So the features need to map and need to be of the same kind for this to work. But again, feature maybe not a lot of people will know about, and it's pretty handy.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if anybody out there is like, wow, I don't, it's like I'm like just a complete beginner to SolidWorks because Steve is showing us all these things that frankly I've never seen before. I think it's okay. You don't have to feel so bad. It was hidden after all, so we did have to uncheck it out of a weird menu. So it's really not your fault entirely. That's actually incredible. I actually had no idea that was there either, and that could have saved me a ton of time in the past in some of my designs. So
yeah,
nice
it's cool. So let me show you one other use case for this, and that is that Feature Paint actually will work across parts. So for instance, maybe I've got an M6 here, and I know that there's an M8 over here. So this is another, Mark, this is one that I don't know if I forgot or I just didn't know this, but if you control select two parts and you hit open, it will open both of them. And then you can use this little, the little sorting icons over here to stick them side by side. So like I said, I may have forgotten that, but I was like, that's really handy.
Nice. Little window management.
Yeah, exactly. So Feature Paint, again, just to show another quick example here, if you go in and choose Feature Paint, you can say, well, I'm going to take this counter bore. And Mark, you may have noticed that Feature Paint starts or fires up in the task pane. Mm-hmm. And not the feature manager like a lot of other features do. And the reason is because you can because it's in the task pane, you can go across 2 different parts. So I can take the M8 and I can copy it over here where I've got this M6 and apply it. And then I've got, that feature set of properties copied over to the other part.
Wow. Nice.
So yeah, that's so 2 different ways that you can utilize the feature paint.
I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. I wonder if it's something I can apply to like a toolbar or like a shortcut bar or something like that. Mouse gestures, maybe something along those lines. That would make it a lot more convenient than going into the menu.
Definitely. So the other thing on the kind of the realm of productivity tools, and this is one probably a lot of people may know, but I thought about this. The selection tools inside of SolidWorks, the selection command, the arrow, it's so good at kind of knowing where you're at and what you're in that I don't even think about this very much. But if you do hit the drop down, there's actually a fair number of different ways that you can select things. And I'll point out some of my favorites. So one is like selecting everything that's suppressed. So if you think about like, oh, I've gone through, I've been working for hours, I've been suppressing things or whatever. Now I need to get them all unsuppressed. I don't have to search back through the feature tree. I can just say select suppressed. It will highlight what's been suppressed. And then you can say select, set to resolved. And I'll go ahead and toggle on, any parts that we've suppressed in the background. Another favorite of mine along those lines is being able to choose select mated to. And so this is handy because if you select a part, it will select anything that's been mated to that part. And this can come in handy because you can then, right click and choose isolate. And then you can get down to just those parts that have a relationship to each other.
That's really handy. It's way better than the breadcrumbs and all that stuff I've been trying to finagle with. So it's really nice.
Yeah. So I love that one. I also love the ability to select toolbox parts. So this assembly has a lot of hardware in it. Selecting toolbox is an easy way to grab all of that, especially if I want to suppress it or turn it off. You do run into cases like this assembly, though, where it's got a lot of hardware, but they're not toolbox parts. I've worked with customers who, for whatever reason, decide not to use toolbox. They build out their own libraries, doesn't have the toolbox flag. So this option right here to select identical components is really handy because all you got to do then is like select, this piece of hardware, and it grabs every one of them that looks like that, or, every instance that matches that. Right. And so it's a way that you can still quickly make selections, make suppressions, those types of things without, without having that toolbox flag in there. So another kind of cool little productivity tip there.
That's awesome. There's also the select by size, which I've used a lot to kind of do almost sort of a similar thing, right? If I don't have toolbox, for whatever reason, select by size can be helpful.
Yep. Another cool one that I like is like if we look at this from the right, is to select by views. And so what this does is basically anything that's visible in this view, I'm just going to choose current view, it selects.
Oh, no way.
Right. And so anything that's basically been hidden or occluded by the parts doesn't get selected. So if you think about really big machinery design and things like that, it's like, I want to, like, everything that's visible, I want to select and hide because I want to be able to kind of keep working my way into the design or in a number of use cases. That's another great way to quickly select items in your design. Right.
That's awesome. Ali says 2 minutes in and my mind is blown several times. So, absolutely. Good. Yeah.
All right. So those are some, actually, let me show you one other selection option that comes in handy with parts. And this happens with parts. You come in here and we have what's called power select. And power select is interesting because, like, if you think about the scenario we talked about earlier, it's like, well, I didn't name my fillets. I didn't tag them. I've got this part from somebody and they've named all their fillets and I don't know what they've named them. Nothing's tagged, blah, blah, blah. But I just need to select all of the fillets or all of the fill in the blank. Power select is really handy because you can, first off, you can choose edges, loops, faces, features to select. You can do it based on color. You can base on edging. There's a ton of ways to filter this, but then you can just do it by feature type too. And so I'm going to say select. I just want to select all the ribs, or in this case, we'll do all the fillets. And I can hit search, and it just selects everything. So if I'm trying to quickly create a version of this design where it's like, I'm going to do this for FEA, or I just want to suppress all of these features or what have you, you can do that. But the tip about this power select that I will tell you is you want to make sure that if you want to keep everything selected, you need to hit close here in the middle of the dialog, not cancel. If you cancel it, everything will go unselected. But if you hit close, all the features will stay selected, and then you can suppress them, or you can come over to the feature tree and you can, swap out their colors or whatever it is you wanted to then do with them. Right.
All right. Solid Idea says, whoa, that's a cool one. I use select by color in an upcoming video. So yeah, if you guys have more interest in some of these selection options, definitely go check out Solid Ideas channel. Check out that video coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that's a handful of productivity tools that I think hopefully sounds like some people weren't aware of and can make you just get around features, things like that a little quicker. Let's transition into ways that you can gain some insight into your designs. And let's start with this part, the side part of our hatch here. So I'll set up a scenario for this one where, maybe you're a contract manufacturer and you get a part in from your customer. This is the original one that they provided you, but then they give you another one. They're like, hey, this is Rev, the new Rev G, or whatever. And you're like, oh, cool. I wonder what's changed. So this is handy because you can come in and go to compare, and then there's actually a number of different ways you can do comparisons on geometry. If you pick any of these three, the documents, features, or geometry, it actually will fire up the same dialog, and you can toggle to something else if you need to. But features for SolidWorks parts, features is actually quite handy. So you set your reference part, and then you can just go out and browse to the part that you want to, the new version that they've sent you, and then run the comparison. And this will go off and it'll actually look at all the features, compare them all, look at the geometry, all that kind of stuff, and then set the two windows side by side. And the thing about this that I like is it actually ties the two together, so that as you interrogate something, it's zooming in to both versions in the same location. And basically what it does is it gives you a side-by-side comparison over here as well. So I can see that this M8 was removed here. And then I can also see that the chamfer changed size. So if you actually select the chamfer, it'll tell you what the value was modified to. So from 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter. And then you can see that a number of features were removed, didn't exist in the original and now do exist on the new one. And so this is handy because as you rotate this around, it's like, oh, they sliced off the back of this. They've added a chamfer. There's a bunch of new holes, so I can actually see what's changed between these new parts from one version to the next.
Man, that's great. I've used the geometry compare because maybe that seems like the most intuitive. But this feature compare is really, really useful. And
Yeah.
Ibra agrees. He says, "Oh, this would be insanely useful for me." So that's really, really, really nice. So
Yeah, the geometry compare is actually handy. You can utilize it in this situation too, where you do have features. But if you deal with imported geometry, the
mhm.
geometry compare is handy because once you get it imported into SolidWorks, you can literally just compare based on the geometry of the model and not the feature tree. So that is quite handy. And the other thing I like about this is if you hit the save button, you can actually save out a report. And if you click the options, there's a really handy option for what views you want to include. So you can tell it to include only the current one, or you can do current and specified, and you can say, what additional views you want to include. And then when you hit OK and save the report, it will go off and generate views, and it creates an HTML version of the report for you. And this is nice because if you open this up, I'll pull it off screen here just so you guys can see the actual report. But when you open the report, give me just 1 second here. You get all that information, right? So you can see exactly what the reference part and the modified part is, and then it grabs the comparison views for anything that you told it to. So this is a super slick way to just kind of get an idea and capture the differences for whatever reason, just so you need it for your records. It's a cool way to capture everything together.
It's not every day that somebody shows me new UI in SolidWorks that I haven't seen before. So I'm really blown away by some of these. If anybody is watching and they're interested in some of these compare tools, I will also talk about the one on the platform that we have. We have a compare on the platform. It's a geometry compare, and I think if you're doing a geometry compare, it's probably better than the one that's in SolidWorks. But this reporting is also really nice too. So on the platform version of that does not have the reporting. So, but
100%, yeah, and you bring up a great point. I mean, there's lots of great capabilities in SolidWorks as well as on the platform for doing a lot of this type of insight, gaining insight into the design. All right, so let me show you another example of some insight that you can gain. And that is, we'll go back to this part here. And there's actually a couple checks that are handy if you do things like plastic parts. We can do a thickness analysis. The one I'm going to show you real quick, just for time's sake, is you can do things like a symmetry check. And, this part looks symmetrical. We want it to be symmetrical when it's produced. But we also want to make sure that something didn't happen. Like somebody didn't, if I'm not the one that modeled this, that somebody didn't do something that makes it not be symmetrical. And, spoiler alert, I made it not be symmetrical, but not to spoil the end of the, to Titanic for you, but, but the way this works is basically you pick the right plane, you pick a plane that you want it to analyze against, and then, you can just hit check. And it goes off and it looks at both sides of the model across that plane. And it'll tell you if there are unique faces that have shown up. And it will show you, so for instance, if we look at unique, like when we look at side A, you can see, all right, it's got this fillet inside of here is apparently unique compared to side B, which has a fillet on this side as well. So something's off between those two. And what's interesting too is then you can look, we're not so much interested in the symmetric faces because obviously that's what we're after, but then you have asymmetric faces where, you can see that the faces associated to that fillet are also different. And it's likely because of that fillet. So this gives you some interesting insight into, like, did something happen? Was there, something I need to look into related to how this was modeled, to see what the difference in symmetry is. And like I said, spoiler alert, I went in and deleted the face and added, basically
Sabotage.
sabotaged it, Mark. So
this is great. I've actually used this in the past because, in some in some things, like, you want it to appear symmetrical, but it may need to have different features on one side versus the other, like for clips, or, maybe it has to avoid a specific feature in an assembly.
yeah,
And it's a great way to highlight something, so you can put it like quickly into a report or something to show your manager, so that, everybody's on the same page and everybody knows that it's been done properly and that sort of thing. So in some cases you want things to be different, but generally the concept should be symmetrical, and that's a great tool for that as well.
yeah, that's actually a really great use case that I never, didn't dawn on me, but I can definitely see where that's needed. Okay, so let me show you an analysis, give you insight into your design on assemblies as well. And so this one, I imagine people are familiar with this one, which is assembly visualization. We've actually done a lot to this over the last couple releases, but it's still always a little bit surprising to me, because it's that people don't use it, or maybe forget about it, because it is really, really powerful. But the gist of it is you can take your assembly and start to, as the name implies, visualize it based on different criteria. So you can have your feature tree. You can also expand it into the individual components. You can control the number of color variations, and then start to organize it. Like, what part do I have the most of in here, or where's the most amount of my mass coming from? These are the two defaults. But I want to show you a couple additional things. One, there is a really, really handy element to this, which is performance analysis. And what this does is it lays on top your graphics triangles, your open time, and your rebuild time, and it allows you to visually see that. And so, if you download parts from different suppliers or whatever, those inevitably are sometimes the hidden reasons why your models don't always perform super well. They might model all of the threads on the hardware, which visually looks amazing, but having that level of detail may not be necessary for your large assembly. And so being able to dig into this and say, okay, well, this is my top contributor to my rebuild time. And then digging into it a little bit more, I can start to see, okay, well, this part specifically is maybe where I want to spend a little time, either in simplifying it, or whatever it might be, to get the performance to be as good as it can. And so assembly visualization is a fantastic way to just really kind of visualize the design. But you can also customize this. So if you hit this, you can say you want to add a column in addition, maybe to mass, and then come into more. And what you'll see is you can do all kinds of additional things. So you can do custom properties. You can do mass, material, all of that it's all here. And some of my favorite are actually the fact that you can pull in data management related properties, both from PDM Pro. So this was an enhancement we made, I believe it was last year. PDM Pro capability allows for those properties to show up in assembly visualization. But if you use the platform, you can also pull in things like maturity. So if you want to look at which part of your designs are, released, which ones are in work, and which ones are frozen from a maturity standpoint. So it's almost like being able to visualize the status of your design right on the design itself.
Wow, that's excellent. Those are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also like external references. There's one that does external references as well. So that can also help you with kind of visualizing that aspect of your design. If you're concerned about external references, use those a lot, and then that would be another one you could throw up there, which is a really good one.
That's a great one. Yeah. Being able to pull up the external references. The other thing is you can create formulas. So like, I'll just highlight the example here, where, volume times quantity, and then, map that out on your design. So you can do a lot with this to really get some significant insight into your assemblies. All right. So
EJK points out that McMaster Carr is like one of the the flagrant offenders of way too much detail into a screw component, and you put like 300 of them in your thing. You're like, what? Like, why is my assembly bogged down? It's like, oh yeah, I need a simplified version of this in order to have a high performant assembly.
Yeah. And I think it's a lot. I think it's that way with a lot of different, you get a part and it's like, it doesn't really matter where you download it from, but I've ran into situations where it's like the knurling is geometrically accurate, and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't need the knurl on this knob to be this accurate, So lots of use cases like that for sure. All right, so that's our section on gaining some additional insight into designs. There's lots more we could cover, but those are some of the ones that I wanted to kind of bring to the forefront. So let's do this. Let's now transition into, I want to show you a couple things related to drawings. So let's make a new drawing of this assembly. And I don't know if you noticed it, Mark, but that assembly actually was at an angle. So it basically had been designed in context. And if you remember, when we looked at it from the right view, it was actually tilted up at an angle. Not super uncommon, although it does provide some interesting challenges when you're trying to get the view that you want on the drawing. And there's obviously some ways that we can do this, as far as like saying, well, I want to go, normal to a face and kind of put that initial staged view. But another thing that I want to point out, especially when it comes to more of that isometric style of view, is on your view toolbar is this icon right here. And when you select that, you can then pick a view, and right on the drawing, you can start to rotate this into a perspective or an orientation that maybe best fits your use case for what you're creating the drawing for, and then hit OK, and it'll remember that. So it's almost like on the fly, you can create the orientation that you want specific to the drawing that you're creating. Not to mention, it's kind of just a super handy way to like interrogate a view. You can rotate the thing around, and then when you're done, you could hit the red X instead of the green check mark, and it'll snap back to whatever orientation you had. So I like that one a lot.
Is that on that toolbar by default?
It's a good question. I think it might be.
I don't know if I've ever used that, which is crazy to me, because I feel like that's definitely something I've come across before. I mean, my normal workflow is just to completely rebuild the whole assembly, obviously. But what you showed seems a little bit better, so I might use that next time.
Fair enough. So along the same lines, this is another little, since we're on this view toolbar, this is another little one that I like, another feature. So I'm going to create a new model view. This is another one of those things that's like, I think I must have forgot about, but like you can just pick any part that you can see in this assembly, as instead of browsing for it, you can just like pick it from here, and it will, create create the view you want of that part right on the drawing. Now, this is the top view, which is fine, but it's not super conducive to how I want it shown. And so another trick is to come over here to the icon just next to it, and you can rotate it right on the screen to an orientation that you want. In this case, 90 degrees. And by the way, the dialog, you can actually key in the amount too. But
okay.
Instead of just dragging it, so you can key it in, and then from there, your projected views will work, as kind of you would have anticipated. I'll tell you the number one reason that option, that ability to rotate the view, comes in most handy for me is with sheet metal parts and their flat patterns, because a lot of times you're designing the sheet metal part in the form state in an orientation that's going to work, is most convenient in the form state for however you plan to use it. But then you go to flatten it, and the flat pattern sometimes isn't in an orientation that's conducive to the drawing that you're creating, right? And so making the flat pattern and then sometimes utilizing that to rotate the flat pattern is really handy.
That's excellent. I mean, these two drawing, productivity enhancements are incredible. If you've ever had a need for one of those two, put a +1 in the chat for us. Let's see that people are awake out there. I think that's those are pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I would definitely use these, and I will be very shortly. So these are incredible.
All right, so let me show you. We'll kind of go old school with this one. I don't know how many people deal with layers that much anymore, but there are some pretty handy use cases. And in SolidWorks, you can turn on the layer toolbar, and when you turn it on, a lot of the same things that we're kind of used to for layers are there. So let's make one. Let's say, for instance, we want to put everything that's made out of UHMW. Which is just a type of plastic. It gets used a lot in machine design and other use cases. But we're going to say we want that to be blue, and we're going to hit OK. So that's now kind of our active layer. And this is kind of cool. You can then come in and select parts. Like, so for instance, we're going to grab these guys and then right click. And then you can actually change the layer that those are on. So I can hit change layer, and then we're going to say the UHMW layer. And now their line, weight, color, all of that adheres to the layer that you've assigned them to, which is handy if you run into cases where you have to export DWGs or DXFs of your designs. And I know, like, when I was doing machine design, oftentimes we had to provide that as a deliverable with the machine. And sometimes there were like requirements associated to how that needed to be delivered. And so this is, again, whether it's for visual reasons or for, you've got to output it for a specific use case. That's also a kind of a deep cut, if you will, feature.
Yeah, especially for those downstream manufacturing reasons. I mean, that's huge. So some people require layers, and if they're not in there, they don't even know what to do with the file, because they can't break it apart. Everything just comes in as like a block or a line. So it's it's almost impossible for some people downstream to use it. So those are great.
All right, so let me show you one more with bills of materials. So we'll add a bill of material for this. Actually, before I do that, let me switch the layer back to this guy. So we'll add a bill of material. And all right, so one thing, I forget how many releases, it was a couple releases ago, but you'll notice some of these are capitalized, some are not. And for some of us, it drives us absolutely nuts that they aren't one or the other, most of the time capitalized. And so, if you select the bill of material, this feature right here, all uppercase, is a really slick way to just get everything uniform looking, right, on the bill of material. So I love that one. I also like this. So that's our full bill of material. I'm going to add another bill of material here. Initially, we'll just have it be a duplicate, but another enhancement that we added a couple releases ago is the ability to group and filter this. So, I might want to create a bill of material that is only hardware. So you can, come in and do a custom filter. And for a lot of customers, I imagine the common use cases is you've got a part number that typically has some kind of indicator for something like this. It just so happens that everything in my bill of material that's hardware starts with the letter M, which, by the way, the begins with is actually case sensitive. If you were to do lowercase, it actually won't filter the way I'm going to show you. But so if I do M, now I've got a filtered bill of material that's just my hardware. And you can save that out as an Excel file, or whatever use case from there that you want to be able to leverage it with. But now you've got a filtered down bill of material for just the hardware and the design.
That's awesome. And I believe those can be tied to display states if you wanted them to be. I think you can get advanced
new
with that. Yeah.
In 2025, you could tie them to display states. Yep.
Yeah,
that's another way to get to it.
Yeah.
So that's hopefully that's helpful. A couple of quick tips for lesser known features around drawings that hopefully make things a little bit easier. And broadly, as we kind of wrap up, I hope these were for some of you a fun stroll down memory lane of features that you may have forgotten about, and for others of you, maybe it's a new tool or a new way to be a little bit more productive or gain a little bit more insight into your designs.
That's great. So yeah, thank you for these. Yeah, we're getting all kinds of compliments in here. Gurpreet says super cool tips. Q1 says great color tip. I do this manually and have done forever in a day, so looks like his productivity is going to be increasing as well. The Nitro. Oh yeah, I'm just going to go through these chats real quick. He says there's a lot to catch. Will this be available for later review? Yeah, absolutely. So check out our YouTube channel. We have a playlist for all of our SolidWorks live episodes, SolidWorks live design episodes. So definitely make sure to go and check those out. Sean says tools that do not have a case changing automation when dealing with large amounts of text are a big thumbs down. And I couldn't agree more. One thing that's really nice about that is, and there's another tool in SolidWorks that you can check your documents. So if your company has like specific standards, you can build in a documentation sort of checker to make sure, things are always in millimeters, or, don't have, red coloring on them, or, whatever. But one of them could be that, all text is capitalized. And yeah, so a bill of materials would usually be caught by something like that. And then, for Mark, back in the day when I was doing CAD, 10 hours a day, I would be sitting there, going through and retyping everything in all caps. So that's a great enhancement. So
yeah.
Omar says, "Oh, finally someone from you guys does a real explanation." Thanks, Omar, I guess. Yeah. No, that's obviously a huge compliment. Steve is always so good at making things seem simple that can tend to be complicated. So that's a great great way to explain things. So thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so before we go, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to, Steve, since you have the floor?
I don't know. I'm grateful for you walking us through, being our host, and definitely behind the scenes Jesse, who is making us look good. So
yeah, absolutely. Jesse, Ian, thanks guys on the production side. Thank you guys so much. So, all right, well, to wrap this up, thanks again, Steve. This has been enlightening. There are definitely a lot of things in SolidWorks I've never seen before, and that was a real pleasant surprise. So thanks for showing us those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, guys, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if you've learned something new today. I'm hitting the like button myself, so you can join me in doing that. And that way we can continue to bring you more of these amazing episodes. So I'd also like to point out our latest episode of SolidWorks Live from yesterday. That's also something that I would highly recommend checking out. It was discussing SolidWorks Ultimate, which is our sort of latest version or latest release of SolidWorks. Of course, you may be familiar with the standard, pro, and premium versions of SolidWorks. Well, Ultimate takes it to a completely new level. It's not just iterative. It's a whole new ball game with SolidWorks Ultimate. So if you have any interest in that, definitely check it out. And so, yeah. So again, thanks, Steve. Thanks to the producers behind the scenes, Jesse and Ian. And we will be back next month. So we'll